Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing, Bob?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you, and welcome everyone to Pop Culture SquadCast Live. It is Tuesday, March 3rd. It is Women's History Month. We're going to lean into that as much as we can because I think it's really, really important. We talk about it and we find out why we do it and think about the things we want to celebrate. um, our guest tonight is someone I think we're going to talk about that a little bit with. She is a librarian. She works for um, some companies that are really important about getting comics in the hands of educators and and students and readers and young readers. And so we're talking about a lot of that. In the meantime, um, how are you doing?
How am I doing?
Yeah,
I'm
it's a crazy
I'm
world right now.
I'm I'm mostly alive. Um, I've gone through what you have informed me is a national plague of colds.
Yeah.
My first cold in over 10 years, and I forgot how much I didn't miss it.
Well, the thing is, I don't get them very often either, but I had one. I had, the same thing. Not we didn't share it. It's just been going everywhere. And that's the reason that we actually had to cancel a show. The first one we ever did was earlier this month that I couldn't make,
Mhm.
or last month. Um, we have some news we're going to talk about. Before we talk about the news, I want to talk about a passing, one that we kind of expected or knew was going to come at some point. Um, for those who don't know, Tatiana Wood, um,
One of the
artist.
greatest color artists ever to walk the earth.
Yes, I mean, I was struggling to put it in words, and you hit it. But she was yesterday would have been her 100th birthday. Um, she was 99 when she passed away on Friday. Um, and and I put together a little retrospective. We're just gonna share it with everybody, and then we'll talk about her for a second. But we want to remember Tatiana Wood.
Thank you indeed.
um, some of those are comics that I remember buying off the shelf. Her history is amazing. She was born in 1926 in Germany. She was sent to the Netherlands as a teenager to go to school during the World War II. Um, she came to America in 1947. She ended up marrying Wallace Wood. They were married for about 15 years or so, and worked with him. Um, but in about 69, she started working for DC, and by 73 or so, she took over all the covers for DC, coloring all the covers plus interiors on other books. Um, and she continued that into the 80s, and in 83 or so, she split the cover color work with Anthony Tolan. She continued to color interiors. She colored so many issues of Swamp Thing and Animal Man and The Question and
Indeed.
Camelot 3000. Um, and you knew her, and you had the reason I wanted to talk about it is you and I have talked about Tatiana Wood over the years, and you've told me how much you cared for her and the work that she did. So why don't you share with the folks who haven't heard that yet?
Well, her work obviously speaks for itself, and you did a wonderful job just sort of previewing or post-viewing some of that work. Tatiana was a very profound colorist. She was like a method actor when it came to coloring, and the question was a tough book to produce because it took so much time. And part of the reason why it took so much time is because she, alone amongst almost all the colorists I've worked with, wanted to go over the script panel by panel and the pencils panel by panel so that she fully understood the story. And that was fine. I was more than happy to do that. I don't know what more than happy what it means, but I was happy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We'd have these fascinating conversations about it and about different types of lighting effects and stuff. So I wound up learning a lot more about some of the more subtle practices that went into coloring comics. And these are in the flat color days, of course. So I got a lot out of it, and I know that our readers did because she did a phenomenal job, not just on the question and on Swamp Thing and on Animal Man, but on everything that she touched. Plus, she would talk about Wally Wood, her ex, always referring to him as Wallace, which I thought was really cute because we all refer to him as Woody or Wally, as in Wallywood, because hooray for Wally Wood. But she always referred to him as Wallace, and there was so much respect in that. I come from a generation where Wally Wood was king. I mean, Wally Wood was the greatest comics artist and comic book artist to my generation at that time, and he had a lot of really good competition, particularly over the EC days. But he worked with a different color artist. He worked with Murray Severin, which shows you how lucky Wally Wood was.
Sure.
Tatiana, she understood or came to understand the mood of Hub City. And as I've said before, our run on the question, the O'Neill Cowan run, which ran for 3 years, wasn't really about Vic Sage or about the question. It was about Hub City. Hub City was the star of that book, and she got that, and the atmospheric range that she brought to Hub City made that book. We overlooked the fact that she was also one of Joe Huber's favorite colorists, and colored much of Joe's work over at DC, not just his work, but the books that he edited. Because Hubert had such an eye for talent that he could start a school, for crying out loud. And I miss working with any creative person that I've had a good time working with, of course, because the creativity that comes out of that is wonderful. But Tatiana was special, partially because of her accent and because of her upbringing. But she just knew color. She knew color storytelling the way almost nobody else did. And she helped make each of the books that you just showed us, and many, many more. So, Tatiana, 100 years? That's great. Thank you for every minute of it.
Yeah. I picked some of those books because they're things I knew. Her work was just so very important. There were some interesting things that people said. She had said something. Phil Hester said she's as important to Swamp Thing lore as any writer or artist. One of the highest honors of my career was being colored by her for a time on that title. How she must have thought the comics world collapsed to go from Bernie Wrightson to me, which is funny. But one of the things that that's been a common theme that people have talked about is she colored so many comics, making impressive choices with such a small palette choices available then. Like, it's a completely different world to where colorists have, at their ready today versus what she had available to. And just the her ability, there's almost an ethereal nature. Like, I picked particular covers for that retrospective that, showed her mastery of light and of reflection, with, old color separation technology,
which I sometimes miss. Not that I don't
Sure.
really, with full color palettes that we have today. We have about 14 million colors, and that's not an exaggeration. We have 14 million colors that technically we could address in our comic books. In those days, we had like 72. And that's a big difference there. You are very, very limited, but that's the way it was, and that's the way it was from the beginning of comics, from newspaper strips as well. So that's what she learned. That's what she did. That is what she mastered. Today, it would be retrofitting to teach a color artist how to do that work. But for her, that's how it was done. And my God, she squeezed every drop of fruit out of those.
I wanted to there was one little funny thing I wanted to talk about. We were talking about these things. And that is that House of Secrets 62 or 92. I'm sorry. House of Secrets 92. I'm trying to get it up here. There, I must have lost it. Anyway, House of Secrets 92, which is the famous first appearance of Swamp Thing, she did not color the cover. It was 1971. Jack Adler colored the cover. She did the interiors. She did that story. She also, there was also a story in there that she colored that was drawn by Alan Weiss.
Yes.
Did you know that he had a story in that book?
Yes. Now that you mention it, I do recall that. Alan is a wonderful guy and a terrific artist, and was part of that really vibrant early 70s comics movement that really gave us, Bernie Wrightson, and it gave us Len Wein, and it gave us, everybody that we think of as taking comics to the next generation. That next generation is about 4 generations back now. The fact that Jack colored the cover, and he colored most of the covers in those days, was that just shows you how brilliant DC's coloring department was, which Jack ran for many, many years. Jack was an exquisite color artist, and the idea of him designating Tatiana or anybody else, Tony for that matter, to do something, that's like a mark of approval right there. Sure. Jack Adler's the guy who colored the early Prince Valiant. He'd spend all week coloring that one huge page back in the 30s. And they had their coloring department in-house. They did the engraving back in the 50s in-house,
right?
Which was rather remarkable. Today it would be unnecessary because of computers, but back then, The thing about Tatiana and every other color artist is that in comics is that it's also their job to make up all those bad deadline misses because they're at the end of the food chain.
Sure.
So sometimes, and by sometimes I mean damn near all the time, they're really under the gun. And if you can't match that pace, you're out of work. And to match that pace and to do such brilliant work, page after page after page, year after year after year, my hat's off. I miss Tatiana. I missed her when she was still around, but I didn't see her. She didn't do conventions. It was
she had a long road. She's been struggling with memory issues for some time now, and it's time for her to go, I guess.
Me too. And I'm a lot younger.
Well, we're gonna change topics a little bit here. Something we cover on this show, if you pay attention at all. So we have some film and TV news that has hit since Mike and I have been together. It appears we have a winner in the bidding for Warner Brothers Discovery.
Yes, we do. And my knee-jerk reaction is, gee, I wonder who they're going to sell Warner's off to next year.
I mean, there is that. They don't really want it. I mean, the winner for people who have had their head on a rock in pop culture news is that Skydance, the current owner of Paramount and CBS, has won the bidding war. Netflix has stepped away, and so Skydance and the Ellisons are going to purchase Warner Brothers Discovery in total.
Let me jump in on something. There's a lot of conspiracy theories going around about how the Ellisons are very right wing, very, very much part of Trump's camp, how they got away with it. There's nothing nefarious about it other than the fact that they put more money on the table than anybody else, and that money came from Saudi Arabia.
Nothing nefarious about it.
Nothing nefarious about that.
Fair. Yes. It is not a conspiracy. They just were able to convince enough people to give them enough money to outbid. That is what they did. And how would you the thing that gives me the biggest pause is it feels like, and I could be wrong, but it feels like they very much wanted CNN above all.
Yes.
That it wasn't about pretty much anything else included in Warner Brothers Discovery, which is quite a bit, but they wanted CNN. The initial sale that Netflix had brokered did not include CNN. They were going to spin that off to something else. And so when I said that they're going to purchase in total, they're going to purchase all of the studios and the streaming solutions and the broadcast television departments. And we will now have a combined Paramount Plus, HBO Max thing.
It's a streamer. Yeah. It's actually a better fit for Paramount than Netflix would have been.
Yes.
Because they did buy all of the assets from Discover as well as from Warner's, and they can put it all together in their whole big streaming thing. And there's way too many streamers, and people are just pissed off at having to spend so much money. So I could see some good coming out of this. However, I am reminded about how fast the Ellisons trashed CBS News and turned it into a living joke. immediately.
Immediately.
The ink was not dry on the deal.
Correct.
Before they totally decimated 60 Minutes and CBS News, the Tiffany Network, which, if your name is Tiffany, you should be pissed about that now.
Well, we will continue to watch. You had mentioned to me earlier before we went on the air how long it would take for Skydance to figure out that they own DC Comics.
Yes.
And I suggest my opinion on that is sometime before June 26th. They'll figure it out.
No, I disagree with you, but lovingly, they'll see it as a movie, and either a movie that makes them a lot of money or a movie where they can lose a lot of money, which is very, very, very unlikely. I'm not saying it'll be, the biggest movie ever, but it's going to be hard for that one to lose money, particularly in the summer. We have no idea how long it's going to take them to realize they publish comic books. Back in the day, Paul Levitz, when he was publisher at DC, and even before then, did his best to hide DC from the corporate eye. Once it became part of Warner Brothers, he didn't want Warner Brothers to futz with DC because, and I'm speaking for him now, which is silly, because DC, the Warner Brothers people didn't understand DC. They thought it was just, a company that generates merchandise like toothbrushes, like Bugs Bunny toothbrushes.
Sure.
And they had no heart for the material, or no understanding of how the comic books lead to the movies and to the TV and to the toys and to the merchandising and the bubblegum cards and all the other crap. They had no idea. They just saw it as if we do this right, we'll make money and we'll save our funny bony jobs and I'll get a better job somewhere else. That pressure, we don't know. We don't know how they're going to restructure the company. If they restructure the company, we know they're going to interfere with it. We know that CNN will be virtually, if not literally, spun off. Because all the people who put all that money, $31 a share, is, according to Netflix, about $2 a share more than it's worth. And when they immediately backed out of the deal, they got a check for $2.8 billion. Netflix, because that was the cancel fee for that deal. So they made out great. The movie folks, that's a wacky, iffy business, very ill organized from day one, which was about 110 years ago. And who knows how they'll handle that. But the comic book business, you got to really have a feeling for what we can get out of it, what producing comic books means. Do we need new comics in order to have merchandising and licensing, in order to have Superman and Batman? No, we don't. Just don't tell that to anybody at Paramount right now. Don't tell them that. Tell them we need it.
Yeah, I agree. All of that is exactly how we feel. I'm texting with our guest. She was here earlier, and she's trying to get her back into the backstage. So she'll be here in just a minute. In the meantime,
if you need me to sing or vamp and
no, I want to talk about one of the things we talked about. Oh, she's here, so I can see you. I'm going to bring Moni in just a second. one of the things I want to talk about before we get to that, and you know what, I'm going to hold off, and we'll bring it up later, because I want to talk about the Roz and Jack Kirby awards that were awarded at OAX recently, and particularly the Newcomer of the Year, the Newcomer Award winner, and I want to talk about that. Maybe we'll bring Moni and talk about that. In the meantime, please welcome to the SquadCast for the first time, Moni Barrette, librarian and comic book historian and advocate, and now let's get to it. Hi.
Hello, how are you?
We're good. We're happy to have you here.
Be here.
We thank you for dealing with the whatever technical difficulties we had earlier, because you popped in early and then I lost you, and you're back, so that's great. What I'd love for you to, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm just excited to be here.
I am too. I'd love for you to kind of talk about why comics is such a big part of your life.
Sure.
And we can talk about how you got to what you're doing. I want to talk quite a bit about Library Pass and Comics Plus. But why do you love comics?
Why do I love comics? I mean, purely from a fan perspective, I think that I always hesitate, because in education and comics, there's still a lot of misconception, really, in the general public, that like comics are just for kids, or it's just superheroes, or it's just silly stuff. But I will say, like, from a purely fan perspective, it's a nice break from the usually really like dense, small print nonfiction that I end up reading a lot of. I love, obviously, the art of it, and then the culture around it. You know, the comics community overall has been pretty welcoming to me in the last 10 years that I've been here. And then on the flip side, from like a career perspective, I actually am coming out with my own book this year. It's really geared for librarians, but I talk about how comics brought me back to loving being a librarian, because comics readership is so high in libraries. It's so popular. And so for me to connect with that as a fan, and then help bring that to my community, which in turn led to like doing lectures for other people to help them bring it to their communities. And it just has since then been mutually beneficial for both like my professional life and for fun.
What's fascinating to me, and hi, Moni,
Hello.
is that in my lifetime, which has run forever, when I was a kid, librarians were the enemy.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't love libraries. I did, because I'm a ridiculous reader. But if they saw you had a comic book, they would take it.
Yeah.
And worse still, you knew when they confiscated it, they wouldn't even read it. Mm-hmm. God damn it.
How dare they?
And today, and that's 1,000 years later now, but today, you folks are probably our primary source of new readers. You're the ones who are turning younger readers onto the medium. It's not something that they will fall across naturally unless they happen to live across the street from a comic book store, and only 8 people in America do that. Where, you know, it's not on the corner drugstore. It's not on the newsstand. There are no newsstands. Where do you get comics? How do you get turned on to comics? And there's this transitional phase when I was talking with some librarians. This is about 30 years ago. And we were talking about how the industry was changing and how it was opening up to comics. And the librarian I was talking with said, we can't keep the books because people steal them. Graphic novels and albums were the most heavily swiped books in the library. And I said, well, you know, I kind of think of that as kind of success, actually. So I have to thank you and all of your coworkers who have spent, and I know quite a few librarians now who are very much interested in comics. Many started out as comics fans, because if this business is going to continue, if this art form is going to continue in America, it'll continue because of librarians.
I love that. I mean, I love that. I don't disagree, and thank you. And it's funny. I do agree that like the old school librarian, I remember, I think that was really part of the challenge for myself, was when I was like, I love the library, but the librarian scares me. They sit on their throne. They don't seem very approachable. And that still exists for sure. And I was like, but if that's like what smart is, then that's what I want to go for, you know? But as far as comics, yeah, I think anything that gets people reading, which is getting harder and harder, unfortunately. And I think that the modern day librarian, whether they're comics fans themselves or not, because there's still plenty that aren't, at least understands that manga comics is flying off their shelves. I actually just came from Comics Pro, and I did like a little graph. It was like a map of my crazy mind of like trying to figure out where the points of discovery are for comic books in libraries, and also the points, this is for retailers, for where books get purchased, right? And where they might come to you, or for publishers where books get purchased when they're discovering through the library. And there's actually a new survey forthcoming. Can't give all the details away, but as many as 50% of participants self-reported that they discover their manga, specifically in this case, it was a manga survey, but from their library. And then they're likely to go out and buy it and become fans and read more and all of that stuff. So it's just an incredible place to find those things. But on my mind map, I put a section that says reader eats comic. And people were like, what does that mean, eats? But like you said, it walks away. It doesn't come back to the library, or it only lasts so many checkouts before it gets chewed up and we need to purchase it again. Either way, they're being eaten at a rapid rate in your libraries. And I love that.
You know, there's another benefit here, and it's a capitalist society benefit, but we can reap rewards from it. You guys turn people onto comics, manga in this case, and the readers like it, and they go to like Barnes and Noble, which seems to be resuscitating, and they'll buy some more. And that makes comics in general more visible, more easier to get, and it keeps some bookstores, a lot of bookstores alive, not just comic book stores. And therefore, it inures to the benefit of the art of reading.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And we've talked about that a lot on the show lately. I want to just take a step back, because I really appreciate you being here, Moni. And I want you to, if you have a moment, to take a nice drink of water. And can you kind of walk us through how, your career a little bit, and how you got to where you are, and what you're doing with Library Pass and Comics Plus, and what they are for our listeners who may not know?
Sure. Yeah. I act like I served time in prison. I did 15 years in public libraries, various degrees. The first 9 of my sentence was children's and teen services, then went on to adult reference. And then finally, and that was when I started really bringing comics into like adult readership. The old trope where, the libraries still to this day, but it's gotten a lot better. Back then had all of the comics in the Dewey Decimal 747 comic strip. No one's going to find them there. They're around other nonfiction. And so that was where I started. I had a new job in a public library working in the adult reference. And I had some success in the library previous of doing like local connections with my retail shop and things like that. But at the end of the day, back then, definitely, reference wasn't doing a lot of fun stuff with adults. And obviously we're sitting here, adults love reading comics, adults love getting prizes, if you're going to read something you love and get incentivized. And so I started bringing some more of that into the mix. New job, brought them out of I realized they had very mature comics in the teen area. And it was awkward for everybody, right? Because the adults were having to like go into the teen section and get their, clandestine comics, and the teens were having to have the olds there. And it was just a matter of time. And this was pre-2020 with kind of the real rise of more book bans and challenges, but we still were getting those often. And I was just waiting for a parent to be like, why is my kid reading like Deadpool rated M from the teen section? So I convinced them to let me make an adult graphic novel section. All that to say that, cut to started, like I said, doing talks at Comic-Con at San Diego in the educator librarian track to tell them like how to duplicate that success, because we ended up hosting a couple of like graphic novel book clubs through Comic-Con. And those from there, like I made a lot of friends, people made a lot of connections as adults that we don't always have the opportunity, especially for free, to meet friends and talk about comics and fandom together. So that all kind of grew. And then my last year in the library was not a good fit. I was at a different location and COVID happened, everything shut down. And it was just like, we don't know if you have a job. And I was like, you know what, it's for the better. And I was able to hook up with friends who had been working remotely on this weird little library pass Comics Plus thing. And they were like, we need someone to help bring in more publishers for more content. What's unique about it, and this is, so as you probably have heard of like Hoopla, maybe you've used it, Overdrive from your libraries. Those already existed, but what's special about Comics Plus, particularly for me from a librarian perspective, is there's an access model there where every person can read the same book at the same time. So those book clubs that I'm talking about, we could all, the library is not going to buy 20 copies and every month to ask everybody to buy a new copy of something, a trade every single month. We were able to, host those kind of things with Comics Plus. And of course, the royalties stack up for the publishers or for the indie creators that we work with. And that's another unique point about it, is that we do work with truly library friendly. They understand that the libraries are their partners and their friends. They're not their competition. And people who just want to be discovered. We actually do a lot of K-12 school business. So schools are reading the comics all at the same time. And it's just been amazing. It's grown quite a bit since then, both in like people understanding what it is and in like customers. So we now are global in our distribution. And it's just something that I've been really proud to be a part of. And I love being fully remote and not having to deal with some of the more prison-like aspects of library life.
Sure.
We talk all the time about how comics encourages reading. I mean, beyond comics, particularly if you get them while they're young. That's very, very true. But comics readers, you look backwards, take the whole thing backwards, and comics readers pretty much grew up in libraries. Now, today, things have changed a little bit, and maybe the library you grew up in is your own library. But nonetheless, if you're a reader, you're not reading comic books. You're not reading magazines. You're not reading fiction. You're not reading nonfiction. You're reading. You're learning. You're talking with your friends. You're socializing. The comic book is the key, particularly for the younger reader, to get involved in all of that. It is a noble cause.
Can you just be like my person that says all these great things, or I just put it on a loop or something and I just keep it in the morning?
Every Tuesday night, right here on Pop Culture SquadCast Live.
No, you made an interesting point about looking back to, because that's another one of my favorite things about Comics Plus in particular, is we have a really interesting like catalog of books that are out of print, are not being distributed easily, filling in series gaps when they're getting eaten at the libraries or they're harder to get because, distribution even in libraries fell apart this past year. Distribution obviously in retail has been a challenge. And so I really like people. I would love to touch and feel a comic book more than I would love digital any day. But when you can't get a hold of it, digital comics is the path for that,
Yeah, plus we're running out of trees. One of the highlights of my career in the comics happened just right before COVID. Karen Green, who's on the show a few months
Love.
ago,
Yeah.
and everybody knows Karen. She's one of the best networkers in the world, and has the job I envy the most.
Yeah.
She took me on a tour of the stacks at Columbia University in the comics department. And I was overwhelmed. I knew all those books existed, and I've read probably a sickening number of them. But to see them all in this very prestigious room where there are artifacts from, millennia ago, that affected me greatly. Now, Karen, being smarter than your average bear, stopped at a certain point in the stacks to talk with me about something, and after a bit, I noticed she stopped at the part where most of my books were.
She does not miss.
That was really smart. And I admired the hell out of her beforehand. I wouldn't be there if I didn't. But I walked away going, "Oh, this woman is good."
The best for sure.
She absolutely is. And I want to come back to some of the things that you mentioned there, Moni. In your ability or your desire to be doing what you're doing, you're advocating for readers, you're advocating for the genre, for the medium. There's another part of you that I want to talk about a little bit, or at least give people an idea. Can you talk a little bit about Creators Assemble Inc.? Are you guys still functioning?
We sure are. Yeah.
Let's talk about that. What is Creators Assemble? Because I think it's super important.
Yeah. So we're an all volunteer run nonprofit, technically incorporated in North County, San Diego area. But we work across the country as much as we can. Our main endeavors currently, we host networking events right now, primarily at San Diego Comic-Con and at WonderCon, where essentially the San Diego Public Library had that educator track that I mentioned.
Sure.
And they still do. And the publicity's gotten better, but in the beginning for a while, it wasn't well advertised and therefore wasn't well attended, despite the amazing programs they were doing. And so kind of coming out of some things with American Library Association that I was working on when I was in leadership there, a mix of that, I started getting as big of name in the modern era creators as I could, so that we could get ourselves on the main schedule. So they'd have to give us a room at the con, so nobody could be like, I gotta walk a mile in the heat and da-da-da. So now for WonderCon in San Diego, we are usually accepted to do the banquet hall, where we do a networking event. We have a comics librarian moderating each table in this big banquet room, or a teacher that works with comics. And then we have we have creators, but we also now have nobody's too big or too small. We have really indie folks. We have folks from publishing and different types of jobs to talk about what other jobs besides the obvious ones are available, career pathways. We have people who do Kickstarter and a lot of crowdfunding for their comics to talk about that process. Just a little bit of everything. We kind of try to loosely theme the tables, and then general attendees will rotate. And so our very first one, Image Comics brought Scott Snyder. And I remember we had a line, and he was charging, of course, for the rest of the time for signings. And I assumed the line, I was like, you'll get to meet Mr. Snyder in a few minutes, but you're also going to have to network with all the librarians and teachers that are here. And this little family was like, oh, no, we're not here for him. We're here to meet librarians, because we didn't know librarians did things with comics.
That's awesome.
That was such a cool moment. I was like, where are the rock stars?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And the beautiful thing is, when you bring in particularly the indie creators to talk to the readers, your younger readers in particular, you are showing them that they can do it on their own.
Yeah.
That they don't need $1 billion. It would come in handy, but they don't need $1 billion and a big corporation that's going to screw you out of your rights in order to produce art in
Yeah.
order to tell stories.
Yeah.
These folks have done it on their own. They you know, it's not easy growing into any art form as a practitioner. It's hard work. You're constantly learning. You are never there. But that first step is the hardest, and it requires immense cooperation. And you're providing that
Yeah.
by bringing those indie folks in, and because they're living testaments to you can do this.
Yes. Absolutely. So with that, also year round, we're providing resources for creators of all kinds to get attached to paying gigs, whether that's us vetting and helping them get connected with jobs that we come across, or whether that's providing education. So for instance, we've had like Gamal Hennessy do a couple of talks for us with like just Joe Illidge, talking about the importance of reading your contracts, what they should look like, all of those business
Gamal
things.
and his reading of contracts.
Oh, yes, but he's amazing.
He is amazing.
I love working with him and anybody that we can to come in and bring the, this is a business and I better get wise if I want to draw for a living or whatever it is. I have to know a little bit about marketing myself, a little bit about how to set up my business. So that's one thing that we do year round. And then our other kind of main bread and butter is we don't just work with comics. We also work with gaming, particularly TTRPGs, learning outcomes for classrooms and libraries. So our main bread and butter financially is that we do guide work. So everyone from like Skybound to Ablaze to some more indie folks that have like one-off comics, really great titles, will do a guide for their specific trade that is either geared towards classroom use, whether that's curriculum tie-ins and exact age reading levels, age ranges. Or we'll gear it towards library use, and it'll be like.
You guys do the creating of those guidebooks?
We do, yeah. We are. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I said that's fantastic.
Oh, it's really fun because I get to read some really cool books before they come out.
That's the fun part.
Yeah. So many fun things that I can't talk about, but I'm sure that's what a creator feels like. So we have a team. We have everyone from like university professors to K-12 teachers, special ed teachers, and then librarians who are able to speak to any aspect depending on kind of where the book is best geared for.
That's awesome. Back in 1976, which is before all of you were born, and when pterodactyls were still flying in the air. We started the Chicago Comic-Con. It was a very, very, very big show in those first days. I was there for the first 10 years. And what we did on day one, on our very first show, which was held at the Playboy Hotel,
nice.
we had an auction for literacy volunteers. I mean, it was actually a group that later merged into literacy volunteers, and so in the second or third year it became an auction for the literacy volunteers. And everybody, all of the pros who would show up, many of the retailers would donate stuff and would offer to auction stuff off because they immediately understood, literacy. We need to have more literate people out there to buy our stuff, to read our stuff.
Absolutely.
And of all of the choices that we had to make, that by far was the most fulfilling. I enjoyed those conventions, but I loved the auction. And one year I was right after the auction, which was the last thing in the convention, I was going off to get married. So my best man, who was also a comics collector, and I sat in the back of the auction room in our tuxedos and bid everything up and then left.
Nice.
It's the literacy volunteers. Come on.
Exactly. So if you're watching this or you're listening to this or you want to come back, in the comments there's a link to creators that you can go to and find out more about it. Creators Assemble Inc. It's creatorsassembles.org. If you want to find out more about what they do, that's a way to do that. I want to, if you don't mind, I'd like to take advantage of you being here, and I apologize for that. But you posted something the other day. You posted a picture or a couple of pictures on Instagram with some friends of mine, Barbara and Bree, and talking about women. And it's Women's History Month, and we're leaning into that. And I would like your opinion, and we would like your opinion on how do you think that women's role in comics has improved since you've been around? And there's more to come, but like, let's start with that. And how do we make it better?
I have less of a say because I'm not a creator. I did just write my first little tiny.
You did, and it's still available. We'll put that in the comments too.
Oh,
there is a Kickstarter that you can still back. That you wrote something for, yes.
Yeah, for charity. But yes, so being that I'm not part of that world, or I'm not like specifically at a comics publisher, so I don't want to like overstate that I'm like a woman in comics, as I probably still identify more as librarian, which is obviously still primarily female. But I will say 10 years ago, because I realize it's been 10 years that I've been kind of officially working with and in comics a little bit. I remember before that going to a local show. It was Comics Fest, and asking about a book that was coming up and having the largest eye roll from a man that was just like clearly and literally turned to his, like, somebody was like, what is she asking for? And he's just like, oh, this one thing. I'm not going to say what it was because I don't want to identify the person. But turned out to be like the biggest seller that year, that he was like, he literally turned to his colleague and was just like, it's not going to be anything. And she's looking for it. And, it's basically, maybe he was just a rude person, but it definitely seemed like this silly woman or silly girl didn't know.
Yeah. So he was saying that you don't know what you're talking about.
Correct. That this book I was looking for was not going to be a seller, and it was not something for them to waste their time on. And it turned out to be the biggest crowdfunded campaign of that year, and as continues to be a series that exists. So
that attitude permeated, and to a certain considerable extent still does, the comic book store environment today, which is a very off-putting place for women.
Yeah, can be.
And understandably so. Bringing women into the comics field, there's always been women in comics, just not enough and not visible. Now women are in force in comics and much, much, much more visible. And we've only seen slight improvement in terms of the booksellers at the comic book store.
Yeah.
And if you want women to come into the store and buy comics, and hey, what the hell, it's only half of your potential audience. You need somebody that they can talk to comfortably to come into the experience. And after a while, the conversations will expand and we'll all be one happy family until we sucker somebody else into our clutches. It's a critical experience on every level. We have to increase visibility of everybody who is not seen. This doesn't just apply to comics, it applies to everything.
Yeah, little ways. And I still wonder how much more difficult, like how many opportunities are maybe secretly not as available for like women of color too. Because I do notice that, I'm still a white woman. I still have plenty of privilege in that regard. But I still know, wasn't there some kind of statistics that came out last year about, as much as we feel like we're seeing more women, and we are, it's happening in comics, it still wasn't as okay. Do you know what I'm talking about? That survey?
There's some napkin math that Rachel Pinellas did, and she's going to be on the show next Tuesday. And we're going to talk about napkin math.
Okay.
But yeah,
there's still a long way to go, and we'll never get there.
Well,
but we'll get a hell of a lot closer. The trick is to not ever let up.
Yeah. One of the pieces of her napkin, we had a thing on Blue Sky today actually about it, but she's going to be on the show next week. We're going to talk about it a little more in depth. But to your point, I think she had done something where she looked at one of the two big publishers. I think there was about half of their top selling books had either a woman as a titular character or heavily involved in the front of the book, and none of the writers or artists were women.
Yeah.
I still get a weird little tickle feeling. It's not every time some male
writers
obviously do a great job, but when we're writing female characters from dudes, I'm always just like, couldn't you find a lady to do?
Sure. I mean, it's such an interesting thing, and we'll talk about this as the month progresses, because it's something that's really important to me and just the way I view things. I am the straight white middle-aged cis-het guy, and I am constantly challenging myself and being challenged and looking for people to challenge me in terms of my perspective. For me, a huge point in my life has been things like women in refrigerators, or Alison Bechdel's Bechdel test, and things like that make me, reassess my perspective and allow other people's perspective in, because it's one of the things that's difficult. And you have people like Stephanie Williams, who's constantly challenging my perspective. And it's important. It's important because we don't want for all of the stories to come from one voice.
Right.
We need more voices. We need people like Gail Simone in the industry. We need people like Leah Williams challenging us. We need artists like Leah Lays drawing what she's drawing. But from why is something like this month? We just finished Black History Month. We now are in Women's History Month, and there's this ridiculous perspective that we don't need to celebrate diversity. We don't need to point it out. But I disagree. I think it's important. Why do you think it's important that we have times where we look back and say, hey, look, this is what we have accomplished?
Just real quick, too, I would love to see, and it's happening, but more women in key business positions at comic book publishers. You were talking about that last with Shelley Bond fairly recently, but yeah.
That's the perfect person to talk about it with.
Yeah.
And there was a point in this industry when one of the most powerful people in the business was a woman, and she hired this guy.
I'm over here.
Yes.
That's true. Jeanette Kahn was publisher at DC, and whereas she was not the first woman involved in comics, or even the first woman in a position of power, the editor Helen Dell worked at Dell. I'm forgetting her last name. Myers was an editor at Dell Comics for decades. Those are the exceptions. Jeanette's greatest role in changing the medium at that time was being there. I'm not discounting any of the work that she had done. She'd done some great work. But being there, she showed the world that we were full of shit.
It's a good thing to show the world. Yeah, and as far as the diversity, aspect, if you want discovery in schools and in libraries, so from my perspective there anyway, where I can speak comfortably, there's nothing wrong with superheroes. They seem like they're always going to have some degree of popularity. I read some superhero stuff, but those diversity in voices, in creators, in types of stories being told, just in subjects and genres, all of that is what becomes like a deepening catalog that makes it more compelling for libraries to purchase, and because readers are going to want to discover it. I mean, I worked with an aging population in one of the libraries that I was at, and they were getting like challenging medical diagnoses. And so being able to, show them graphic medicine that actually laid out with illustrations what was going on with a cancer diagnosis or things like that. And then also, obviously, Jerry Craft or anybody where kids can see themselves in a character, and it's not just people that, no offense, look like the three of us here.
Sure.
It's means the world. I mean, I literally have heard little children just be like, "Look at this princess looks like me," and it's everything to me, and it's clearly everything to them. And that's when they can start to see themselves maybe becoming an illustrator or a writer for a story like that, because they can see themselves in it. And that's how we'll continue to grow in that diversity. And that's the best outcome for everyone, because there'll still be the popular, white straight superhero stuff, but we can have room for all of these stories. Why not?
When the first Wonder Woman movie was released, my daughter, who is an adult, and I went to see it, but we had an ulterior motive. I mean, we wanted to see a fun movie. We wanted to see a great Wonder Woman movie. Quite frankly, we were not disappointed on either count. But the highlight of the movie for me was watching the little girls in the theater whose moms brought them with them, because they were pie-eyed at seeing Wonder Woman on the big screen. And that is an educational experience for everybody in the world who chooses to look at it. We tend not to look at those sorts of things, and that may be where the problem is. Comics is an ocean, and you can swim through the superhero waters and have a great time, and you can swim through all of the beaches. Once you discover one water, it all leads to the next.
I love that description of it. It's an interesting way to think about it.
I want to talk. I want to get into your nerddom just a little bit. Why do you love comics? What was the comic that comic book that you remember like? Oh, I love this is for me.
It's funny because it's like so cliche, right?
Cliche's not bad.
Up until I realized what was comics, like I was always reading like Sunday funny pages, my dad's Garfield books, Far Side, the Gary Larson stuff, just anything I could get my hands on that was my dad's. But I was also reading like my dad's Stephen King and like Robert R. McCammon, like stuff I probably was way too young for. But I really didn't identify as like a comics person, and I had my degree in English literature with classic, as being like the main, all of that. And I was dating my now husband, and he loved comics and got me to read Watchmen. And I was like, this is superhero stuff. But what got me was that I had to reread things and figure out how to read, right? The illustrations, the panels, and what they meant in context with what was being said. And I was like, whoa, this is deeper than I would have thought. And so that's really what got me started to say, hey, there's something to this. Then checking out the local retail shop in comparison to what the library wasn't offering, trying new single issues. And it kind of like was like the rest was history. I was like, people love this. Adults aren't coming into the library the same way that they're loving what they're doing at the retail shop. How can we make that happen? And the rest was kind of history. So,
well, it's critical, and it's an ongoing part of history. And whenever I see people say, what do we need libraries for. I think about the time about 30, 40 years ago in New York City when they had to close libraries down a couple of days a week. Oddly enough, around that same time, there was also a teacher's strike, which I thought was particularly well timed. We need libraries not just because that's where you get books, or the ancillary discussions that happen there and that sort of thing, all of which are wonderful. We need libraries because we need reading cathedrals.
Yeah, I agree.
We need to be inspired like that.
Yeah, and the modern library, kind of in a bid to meet all of the social needs that this country doesn't always accommodate for, is a warm or cold place, depending on if there's really severe weather. The modern library often has like a library of things where they're lending out tools and even basic how-tos for like young adults who don't own all of this stuff. Obviously a place to go for people who don't have it. And then one thing I learned about kind of midway through my library life, which really struck me, is like pre-COVID times, what they call the homebound patron. I didn't realize how many people, for various different reasons, can't physically get to a library, whether it's transportation, whether it's health. But that's where I started kind of becoming an early advocate for balancing with digital collections. Is, again, I'm always going to love touching and feeling a book, the smell of it, all of those things. But not everybody can make it to the library, especially now in the post-COVID, era. And again, not every book is available. And for libraries, as far as remaining relevant, the door count for digital is huge. And that's part of where library funding, where we continue to, prove that we're worthy of existence to our governments. We had 100 people come to the door, but we had 1,000 people access digitally, or whatever that looks like. So the modern library, you're right, the cathedral for sure, but so many of the business centers, wow, the small businesses that start up in your local library, the friends that are made. I mean, I had made friends for life in the book clubs that I was hosting through my library. Some of them are on my board to this day. Like, it's just been an amazing ride. Well,
let me squeeze that anthology to death. Just as we don't have to go to a cathedral, to go a temple, a church, in order to practice our religion, assuming we have such, we don't need a library. But now, particularly with digital, but it is an enhanced experience. It is a social experience. And as I mentioned before, it's sort of a holy experience. Look at all this stuff. Don't tell me it's knowledge, because that's how you deal with it, not what it is. It is stuff. It is history. It is hilarious bullshit. It is wonderful stuff all across the spectrum. Not just comics, not just audio. Libraries have audio, and some will have video. It's the world we live in, and deserves its shrine.
I agree.
I'm kind of on the fence. I think, yeah, the balance, the shrine with I just also always try to get away from there should be quiet study areas, but there was also the areas where I would lead the kids through and we'd be banging on pots and pans and little instruments. I like the modern messy library where we're finger painting and all that, because it's all of those things. And it's one of the last places that you can greet and meet with people for free. It's the last gathering place. It's the last place of knowledge, like you said, of archival, which is so valuable. Also, I like to do a lot of ghost hunting in archives because
hang on. I'm literally just looking for that. I'm like, there's some little thing that I saw somewhere. Ghost hunting.
Yes,
tell us about that.
I love it. It's so much fun. So what I really love is old buildings with histories that are more exciting even than fiction could do justice to. But yeah, the science, or whether you believe in them or not, of trying to capture, just to have some kind of encounter or experience, is also really, really fun. And just being dumb and actually spending my free time traveling out to somewhere I've never been, researching the history of it, hopefully hooking up with like a local historian or historian / ghost hunter in the area. Whenever I travel for like library conferences and things, I try to book a tour, which doubles as like, how you never really get to sometimes like spend time in this cool city that you get to go to a conference in.
Oh
Or
yeah, I know that a lot.
yeah, I hate that.
Yeah.
So doing the walking tour is great because you learn about some of the places and you hear some of the stories, and maybe you encounter some ghosts. And I love all of those possibilities. So fun.
Have you been to the Baltimore convention?
I haven't, and I need to.
You do need to, but if you're looking for ghosts,
Yeah.
who hang out around the comic book conventions, you can't do better than Edgar Allan Poe.
No, you cannot.
So we have a Poe Fest here. We have a couple of them. There's a Poe Fest every year where we're around his birthday, and there's a whole thing. Comics are involved in it and stuff like that. I live in Baltimore, just in case that was unclear. And yeah, it's important. I think I'm frozen. I don't know.
Sometimes. There you go.
All right. So anyway, have you read Dead Flowers yet?
No, wait. Who did that one?
So it just came out. It's a Storm King book. Dwayne Swarzynski wrote it. You need to read that book.
Okay.
It's about a ghost tour. You need to read that book. It's
okay. I love the Storm King kids, so I will definitely support that.
Yeah. It's in their. They started doing this graphic novel thing. Kat and Amanda did a couple, and now this is the next one, I think. So yeah, definitely, I highly recommend Dead Flowers. We had Dwayne on a couple weeks ago talking about it. You'd love it.
Writing it down.
There's so many things that I kind of want to talk to you about, because I love the fact that you came to comics as an adult, because I think that's a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
For me and Mike, I learned to read with comics. It was like the first thing, like all I wanted to consume as soon as I could figure out that I could put the words and the pictures together. So when someone comes at it and didn't do that, and now says, "Hey, this is a medium that I want to be a part of, that I want to consume," I find that to be super. I find it to be rewarding because it means that I wasn't wrong. But
affirmation is good.
It is.
Yeah.
But now that you're there, and now you have the ability to advocate for it, why do you feel that you need to do that? Because you do it with every part of you. Why do you feel that you need to advocate for comics?
Oh boy, that's a great question, and there's so many reasons. I feel like my neurospicy brain could go lots of directions. The community building, like I mentioned, and I just that the book that I have coming out that's geared kind of for library workers is just talking about, use something that you're already passionate about. So for me, that was comics, to connect to your community. So that's a big one, is that I really think that we don't have enough community, just in general, especially as adults, or like support. Maybe you're not always close knit with our neighbors, for instance. Maybe we, have found family. Maybe we have trouble making friends. And so anything that can help build community. And I've seen it happen just through my career, my experiences with comics. Let's see. Why comics? There's so many things. While I will never be one of those librarians or educators that like takes comics that they're only good for reluctant readers, or they're only good for folks who are learning to, a language, or whatever the case may be, that they definitely are good for those things. And those are valid things too. As I mentioned, with diversity and types of stories, I know that there is a comic book for every reader, and they're reluctant. I hate reading. I had a boy on the spectrum, and he was all excited at the library, and he was just like, he had been reading a comic book that we helped him like figure out what type of comic book he might want to read and all that. And he was just like, is this what reading like regular prose is like for you? And we are like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, I can't picture it when I'm reading it. I'm wondering if you can, but when I read a comic book, that's how it looks in my brain. And so he really relates to that better. And I know
That's
a lot
wonderful.
yeah, no, it was like amazing. And I know a lot of educators will call it like a reading ladder, like we'll start them at comics, but then we'll get them reading real books. I don't give a crap. At the end of the day, readership across the human population is declining. And wherever we can get people reading, whether that's articles, as long as they're, really being critical about what they're reading and thinking about it, or that's comics, or that's prose, or that's a mix of everything, is beautiful. And so, yeah, I just think that there's almost not a problem as far as when it comes to literacy or something to overcome that can't happen through comics. At the same time, I'm just a big, like, Creators Assemble is about popular culture, like having fun when learning, like role-playing games, like be fun and silly, but you're working through team building. You're working through, and comics can do the same, as you all know, with the types of stories that you're reading, whether they make you laugh, they make you cry, they make you think, they teach you something.
They get you off your ass too.
Yeah, it's a true story.
Sometimes I wonder how it is that I became a writer, because I was read comic books when I was 2 years old. My sister was stuck with babysitting me. She was a comic book reader. She read me her comics. I learned how to read from that, and then I discovered that they had comics in my local newspaper that my father brought home from work every day. And among the comics in that newspaper that I would read avidly every day were two great strips at that time, Pogo and Little Abner, and English was not spoken in either of those strips. Yet awesome. I learned the sense of diversity. Of course people talk like that.
There's a quote that I enjoy, or I talk back to a lot, that Jim Valvano said in his very famous speech, where he said that there's three things you should do every day. One is to think, one is to laugh, and one is to be moved to tears. And if you can do all three of those things, it's a pretty good day. And that's the gist of his story. And I do that with comics almost all the time, sometimes in the same comic, you know, and that's the thing about it. The thing that I talk about with comics is that comics are good for you. They're good for your soul. They move you. If you whether it's a superhero story, whether it's, but more often than not, there's more. And it doesn't have to be, the mature reader thing. It can be, a YA book, or it can be, a young reader's book. But there are, for example, there's a Storm King kids book. Have you read Ghost Whiskerers?
I think that's in my kids' TBR. Do I need to pull it out and read it?
Well, I'll talk to you about it offline, but I cried.
Okay.
I cried at that book. Yes, it is a fantastic book, written and drawn by a good friend of mine. But the Ghost, it's a book where it's a kid's book, but I cried because there are so many levels to be able to to understand a story being told to you, and being able to connect to that, being able to make yourself vulnerable enough to enjoy. And that's one of the things I think that in the world that we live in today, people aren't making themselves vulnerable enough to be moved. I don't know.
Good point. We think exposing our own vulnerabilities is an act of cowardice somehow. And it's not. It's an act of growth.
That's funny because I feel like I'm just learning that Like I grew up with like, only child, and my dad was a cop, and he was very like, never let him see a sweat. No, all of that
Sure,
kind of
sure.
mentality. And that's kind of the joke is like my husband is the big softy, and I'm like this small little like, And so that's the running joke is it's just like, ew, gross feelings, but I'm starting to learn to have them.
Good,
And,
good.
I have kids and they want to like cuddle and stuff. And I'm like, I guess I'm a mom and I do like these kids. So I'm going to show them some love.
Yep.
It's still like kind of having to open a nozzle with intention, but it's not a bad thing. I do agree with what you guys are saying. To be vulnerable is good, and comics can bring that out. I certainly remember the roller coaster of like Eisner Judge days when we were just in the Comic-Con offices, laughing, crying, screaming, micro napping,
Sure.
repeating.
Sure. Absolutely. All right. Quick question. Who is your favorite comic artist?
Oh God, I have to choose between my children. I mean, I just blanked out on names. Behind me. Jolie. Can you see the piece of art behind me?
No.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry.
Joe, why am I blanking out? The noir, and it's the housewife who's
Joelle Jones.
Joelle Jones. Thank you so much. Yes, and it's signed and everything. Like my brain just left my. But yes, she's up there for sure. Like you can't do a lot better than that. So are we talking like someone who's published and well known, or like someone who's?
It doesn't have to be. What is someone? What if you see somebody? There are people. There are books that I buy just because of the artist.
Yeah.
Are there things like that for you? Are there people?
Yeah, Joelle for sure. You had Emma Kubert on.
I did have Emma.
I
love Emma so much.
As a human and an artist. I thought she would remember me, but she was one of our first for Creators Assemble.
Oh, that's awesome.
Actually, it's anybody with the last name of Kubert.
Really can't go wrong, right?
Yeah, you win. Yeah. That's it.
Phil Jimenez obviously is like that's I mean, it depends. There's so many styles too. Like when I'm working for comedy, like Scotty Young has like the funniest, like beautiful stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't know if you can see behind me. Emily Larrabee is the artist for. I have Candyman and Helen behind me that I had commissioned. She hasn't officially worked on a commercial comic yet, but she's somebody that I've gotten connected with projects, and she does great because it's horror stuff a lot of time, but like cutesy, the big eyes, and like Helen's crying, but she looks beautiful, and she's really great too.
Yeah, absolutely. We bought some stuff from Emma back before I think even before Inkblot, we got some stuff for that.
With the big cat eyes is so cute.
Yes, I love that. It's a thing that's one of the fun parts about comics is that once you are consuming it, then there's all the other aspects to it. There is the collecting aspect of it. There's the talking to somebody else like, oh, what did you like? Why do you like that? What do you get out of this writer? What do you then you get me and I start talking about lettering and it gets all nerdy and
no, I love it. I'm actually like sweating because I'm like, what about all the homies that I didn't just give a shout out to?
No, don't worry.
Like,
Look, the last time somebody asked me who my favorite guitar player was, I shot them.
I would just
that
played guitar as a little girl, and I think I would just shut down trying to answer that question too.
Yeah,
I really want to watch
brain freezes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Moni, this has been so much fun. Before we let you go, what you're going to be at WonderCon? What can we tell people about where to find you or what you're going to be doing there? What's going on that?
Sure. WonderCon, we're doing our 2 networking events. So I didn't mention we do a gaming networking event too with a lot of folks in the TTRPG community. It's going to be all afternoon on Friday of the con. Mm-hmm. That's going to be kind of my next in person. I'm assuming we'll be at San Diego this year, pending getting approval. But It's probably the best two places to see me in person. I'll be at the library conferences if anybody out there is going to be. I know that we have a lot of comics folks come to like American Library Association, which will be in Chicago in June, I want to say. And I'll be at Public Library Association in Minnesota at the end of this month. So got a couple of in-person, be online and around. Creators Assemble is probably the best place because we have my email and everything up over there too.
I have a word of advice. When you go to Chicago to the Library Association,
yes,
the last time I was in Chicago at the ALA, my table was next to a guy who had just written a book about how you cook shark meat.
okay.
And he was cooking shark meat for the entire weekend.
Oh wow.
Not my first reaction.
Was this
that
at
was not my first
place?
reaction. Yes, it was. Yes, it was at McCormick Place, which is a huge place.
Mm-hmm.
And all that shark grilling did not help at all.
It must have been quite the smell.
It was one of the most disgusting experiences in my life.
But if you do need good things to do in Chicago, Mike is the person to tell you what to do.
I might need to take you up on that because the only thing I did was go to a haunted prison, which was a ways out of town and kind of dicey to get in and out of. But
if you're looking for places to eat, or you're looking for a few places where there might be a few ghosts,
excellent.
Let me know.
I love that. I'll hit you up.
All right, Moni, thank you so much for doing this. This was so wonderful.
Fun.
Thank you for sharing all of your information.
Thank you. And thank you for doing what you do.
Oh, thank you both.
Because not to put it all on your shoulders, but you are the salvation of comics.
Right. And when we've heard that on the library side for democracy, no pressure. Just carry it on.
No pressure. Yeah. No pressure.
Well, thank you both so much. This was absolutely amazing, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you much for being here. All right, folks, we are gonna be done for tonight. We will be back next week, and I'm frozen again. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. All right. I'm just gonna keep talking through my freezing, but I don't know why that's happening. But anyway, we're gonna be back next week. Next week, we're gonna have Rachel Pinellas on the show. She is currently an editor at Vault. She has been an editor at DC. She does a bunch of other things, and we are going to talk to her about, we're going to delve further into women in comics and what we can do about it and how we can make it better. There will be napkin math occurring. I'm not sure. I've already told the world that all the napkin math questions will be answered next Tuesday.
You folks out there should realize, and most of you probably do, that we have women on the Pop Culture SquadCast even when it's not March.
Sure.
But because it is March, we make a little bit of an additional effort. And listen, Bob is so good at that.
I just, it's important. It's important, and that's why we're here. We want, one of the things that we do on this show, and I think that's important for us, is that we want to advocate for reading, for comics, for pop culture nerdisms, whether it's TV or movies or comics or manga or cartoons or whatever it is. People should be able to express themselves and be able to consume things that will move their souls. That's what we want to talk about. And having more voices there makes it better for everyone.
And having more voices in the comics community makes us much stronger, makes us better. We're telling better stories. It's critical. It's critical.
All right, folks. In the meantime, we will be back next Tuesday. We will be back the following Tuesday. Stay tuned, and to wherever you're watching this, make sure you follow us on whatever our socials are. We're Pop Culture Squad on all of them. There's some other shows that are going to come out that we're recording, so they may not be on Tuesday nights. So you got to pay attention. And we'll see you next week. Mike.
All right. Thank you for being here, folks. We do appreciate it. And we will see you next week.
All right. Read more comics. They're good for you.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?